Now, new rules for transporting cattle and deer make it illegal to move untagged animals. The National Animal Identification Tracing Amendment Bill made taking an untagged animal an offence, as reported by Nait Scott on farmersweekly.co.nz. Also, in an opinion piece that's coming out in this week's Farmers Weekly newspaper, head of Nait for OSPRI, Kevin Ford, has said that farmers can learn a lot from the recent COVID-19 emergency and how diseases can be managed more effectively through a sound traceability system. Kevin joins us now. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are you, Sarah?
Good. I've been looking forward to catching up with you because we've got lots to cover off, and I want questions from our audience, which they are coming in thick and fast. I know you've said you're open to anything, so that's fantastic.
Yep.
We love a good industry guest like that. Hey, now, firstly, how do we go about achieving a world-leading traceability?
Look, I think the foundations of New Zealand's Nait scheme, its traceability scheme, are really solid. I've looked around internationally, spent a bit of time in North America looking at what they've got. So the foundations are pretty solid. It really comes down to making sure that we will do our part. Farmers, government, industry, and obviously OSPRI, who's administering the scheme. We've all got to play our part to make sure the scheme works well. We've got to make sure we've got a system which is easy for farmers to use, and farmers need to make sure they meet their obligations, tagging, registering their animals, moving their, recording their movement.
We're just talking about these new rules in the amendment to the bill. Could you just explain them for farmers and what sort of messages they need to take on board from this?
Yeah, look, it's always been an offence to move an animal that's not been tagged and registered. And the Act requires an animal to be tagged within 180 days of birth or before first moving off farm, and registered within 7 days of that tag being applied or before first moving off farm, whichever comes first. What changed in the amendment bill was that the government introduced an offence for a transport operator or a drover to move an animal without first checking to make sure it's fitted with a prescribed Nait device. So there's now a $400 fine per animal for a transport operator if they move an untagged animal. Now, they can get an exemption from the picker, which removes that liability on the transport operator if the picker signs a declaration that says all of those animals are tagged and registered in accordance with the Nait Act and its regulations.
Can I just say that thank you, finally? And this is with all due respect to the transport industry, and I've got some dear friends that are stock truck drivers, but right from the start, that's what person in charge of animals meant, and that was one part that this entire part was falling down. So it's about time. It's great.
It was, can't take credit for it. I have to give credit to the Minister for Agriculture, Damien O'Connor. It was a cornerstone piece of his reform package. He was adamant that transport operators needed to play a role in the scheme. And through a good government process, through the Select Committee, the transport industry, through the Road Transport Forum, NPI and Select Committee, sort of hammered out a practical solution that really sort of started to work for farmers and for transport industry as a whole.
Hey, so your former CEO, Michelle Edge, was extremely passionate around the EASD forms, the electronic animal status declaration forms, if I've got that correct. But it took so long to get uptake. Where are we at with it?
Okay, so what OSPRI did, we actually were contracted by the Red Meat Profit Partnership to develop a pilot and a prototype. So OSPRI worked in conjunction with those partners and developed a pilot which does from last farm to meat processor. That pilot proved to be incredibly successful and was taken up by a lot of meat processors. And when that was coming to an end, the Red Meat Profit Partnership asked OSPRI to continue supporting it and to look at developing it further. The OSPRI board agreed to do that, and we've continued to support that particular product. And we're now looking at how we incorporate electronic animal status declarations as part of a fundamental rebuild of OSPRI's technology solution. What we're aiming to do is basically have it so that anybody who logs on and has a Nait account or an OSPRI account can do the animal movements and an EAC at the same time, and you don't need to have separate accounts, and that you can do that via the app as you can at the moment on the phone.
Okay,
we did see a massive increase with COVID, where transport operators didn't want to handle the paper form, and up to 2,500 new users per week were signing up to EAC. It was really good.
Fantastic. We've got questions coming in thick and fast, and I get told off if I don't ask them, Kevin. This audience, I tell you what, they keep me on my toes. So when we're talking about these EASD, these electronic ASD forms, will they be able to cover farm-to-farm transfers? That's from Tony.
They will be in the future. At the moment, obviously on the back of COVID, there was a lot of requests for farm-to-farm functionality. The head of technology solutions at OSPRI, Don Tucker, put a paper up to the board a week ago with some recommendations around that. We're currently working through what the options are to get that functionality delivered faster than was originally planned.
Cool.
But I will say we're going through a massive sort of redesign of all of our information systems, and we need to do this in the most cost-effective and efficient way possible.
Nick Merritt would like to know, Nait should be a number for the peaker. This is person in charge of animal, and a separate number for the property where the animals are to reflect winter grazing practices. What are you doing around that situation?
Okay, so that's a common misunderstanding around the Nait number. The Nait number, its proper name is a Nait location number. So that number that farmers use is actually the location identifier for the land parcels of that Nait location. What sits behind the scene, the system, is your username is your login, and there's a unique identifier linked to your username. Now, we don't actually give you that number because we encourage you to use something memorable, such as a username. So you log in with your username, that actually gets you to your Nait account, and then the Nait location is the Nait number. So it's a Nait location number, and you can have multiple Nait location numbers depending on how many properties you've got linked to your Nait account. So that actually already exists. It's just that we don't give you a personal ID number, we give you a username, or you select your username.
Oh my goodness, they're all coming in. I'm actually going to take the time to ask these because they're all so good. Paul Humphreys actually got a question coming in here that my mum calls them jumpers, but they're just wild West Coast cattle, basically. You'll know what that's like down in Haast, Kevin. What if it's impractical to tag animals like this, like bulls? What are the rules around that?
Yep. So if the animal's impractical to tag, we now call it unsafe to tag. So basically, it poses a risk to you if you were to try and tag that animal. You can move the animal, but you can only move it to a meat processor. You have to visibly identify or mark that animal, so put a rattle down the back, and you need to do a declaration online or call the OSPRI contact centre to record an unsafe to tag animal movement. If you don't do that, then it is an offence and you can actually get fined. So strongly encourage you, once you go to move those animals, you can move them off farm, but they can only go to a meat processor, and you must make those declarations. There's also a $13 levy that you pay when it gets to the meat processor.
And what about if the tag comes off during transport?
Look, where realistic, tags come off during transport. Obviously, with these new declarations, we are checking to make sure that people have declared unsafe to tag animals. We're currently working with MPI Nait compliance team and the meat processors and carry-out operators around how we manage that. So we're taking a very practical approach, though. We do understand they come off in transport. Okay.
Pro Pete Smith, you know, when you have those cute little couple joint accounts, that's she's saying that EASD is very unreliable, which defies the purpose of having it. Nothing more frustrating than having to go home and trying to send a hard copy after the truck has left. What could you do to improve the reliability of it?
I'll just sort of remind people that the current product that's out there was a pilot, and we continue to support that at the request of RMPP. We will be doing significant work on improving the reliability and the stability of that platform in the upcoming future. So all I can say is just bear with us a bit with that. It was a proof of concept and pilot, and we are working hard to get a fully functional system up and available for farmers.
I do want to move on to the macro of the importance of traceability for disease management. My question to you, Kevin, you said the words most cost-effective ways. Are you receiving enough funds coming down the pipeline to not just shave costs on the system we need, but get the money, because building tech is not cheap?
So at the moment, because we're a not-for-profit organisation, anything that we collect in excess either through the tag or slaughter levies or funding from government goes into the cash reserves, which is currently being used to fund the redevelopment. We work very closely with our industry partners, so Beef and Lamb, Dairy NZ, and Dairy Industry New Zealand and New Zealand Government around what the funding requirements are. But at the moment, yes, we have sufficient funds for those rebuilds.
Well answered. So this opinion piece that you've sent through to Farmers Weekly, what was the main message that you really wanted to get out there about how COVID has changed things?
Look, I think on the back of COVID, what really came out was the importance around contact tracing and traceability. For farmers, it wasn't a foreign concept to them. They're used to it through managing TB, movement control areas and restrictions on moving cattle and deer, and the requirements to tag their animals and record their movement. That's very similar to what we're actually experiencing as a nation at the moment. Lockdown was pretty much a movement control area. You couldn't go out of your regions without approval or without recording those movements. The contact tracing we now have for engaging with other people is very similar to what we do for the Nait scheme and managing disease management and livestock. I think what it really stresses, though, is that if we do this right, we can get on top of the disease really quickly. And we can control the spread of that disease and work to eradicate it. So I think for farmers, there's a bit of complacency already setting in for those people who have been impacted by Ebola. I think this is a really timely reminder just to look at our own public health, our own personal experience recently, and then actually look at our on-farm practice and actually not become complacent and think that we can just forget about this. It's about protecting our industry, and it's an insurance policy for farmers.
And very much about our markets becoming more discerning about the integrity that their food is coming from as well.
Oh, totally. I think food provenance is really, really important. And for farmers, if they can demonstrate food provenance, then that actually gives them a premium on the product in regards to the money in their pocket. So there are incentivised compliance to the basis here as well. Farms can actually do a lot better out of this if they can actually demonstrate lifetime traceability of an animal and where it's come from. And I think that's really future potential.
Thank you so much. That's Kevin Ford. He's the head of Nait for OSPRI, and what will be a challenging role, but also eventually a very rewarding role, I believe, would be as well.
This is Sarah's Country.